away from guilt. How real and true can that be? How real and true can that be now? Can you be free from that? If you give to expect something in return, whether you want it or not, you'll get a little shit out of that. Oh no, we're gonna need another kind of love. Yeah, we're gonna need another kind of love to survive. If you wanna stay alive, if you wanna stop the bad, if you wanna help someone, if you wanna dissipate war, if you wanna stay alive, if you wanna stop the bad, if you wanna help someone, if you wanna dissipate war, we're gonna need another kind of love.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome back to those who have been with us before, and welcome to those who are joining on the virtual congress for the first time. Just a couple, one point in particular, if you've got any questions for those who haven't been on before, during the course of Martin's presentation, just if you hover down on the bottom of the screen, you'll see a Q&A box. Just type your questions in there, and then we'll get to those at the end of the presentation. Right, which leads me to introduce Martin Barber, who probably doesn't need a lot of introduction. I'm sure most of you on here know him. But just to say, he is the National Director responsible for marketing for the PSSA. But most importantly, Martin's a creative fine art photographer who has and still does inspire many photographers in South Africa and abroad. He's been awarded his FPSSA, and amongst the many accolades and prizes and positions he won first place in Creative Photographer Admired in Africa Photo Awards in 2019. He's passionate about photography, and this shows in his work and in his workshops and his training. So without any further ado, I'll hand you over to Martin.
Wow, thank you. It's actually quite daunting. I'm sitting here alone looking at a screen, and I think I'm going to ask Jeff to allow all of you just to switch on your cameras, and then I can quickly take a big group shot of you all. No, don't do that. I think we'll blow the system apart or something. I'm not an IT guy, but yes, let me quickly just say share screen, and thank you for all being with us. Screen, I think that's it, and we need to switch on a few little buttons here. So share. And let's go into this. Let's see, almost there. And we're going to say from the beginning. Right. So thank you all for joining us and being here today. Jeff, how many have we got online? Let's just see how many people we've got out there. Then I know maybe I'm only speaking to one or two.
We've got 120.
Oh, lovely, 120. That's amazing. Thanks for all of you for taking your time this morning and being with us. My name's Martin, and I'm going to today try to take you through a few things. But first of all, before I can do that, let me just tell you something which I'm very passionate about. But let me open this to the director and the president of the PSSA, Francois Roux, the first vice president, Jill Sneesby, the second vice president, Simon Fletcher, fellow directors which have joined in today, honors judges, members of the Photographic Society, and fellow photographers, my friends, ladies and gentlemen, and boys and girls. Thank you very much. And also to the previous speakers, Tyrone Ping, Johan van der Walt, and Emil, thanks very much for your contribution to this. The Photographic Society is something that is very passionate to me, and the reason being is it's a society of photographers. It's us. It is an institution, but it's an institution of us. And I urge you to please, I urge you to please contribute to the society, become a member of the Photographic Society. Somebody once asked me, they said, Martin, what can the society give me? And I tend to say to people that the society is not about what it can give me, it's what I can give it. It's something that I can leave my work, something that I can show my work to, and something that I can add to as a photographer, add to others, a gift to you. This Congress is done through the Photographic Society. Many salons, competitions, you all know it, clubs across the country, have all been instituted through the society, and the society is us. And if we don't all be part of the society, how can we create photography for the future? How can we install that into our youngsters and bring it up? Yearly, we have members of our society that pass. They are masters in their work, and through the society we can promote photography within South Africa. So please, I urge you to become a member of society and contribute to it as a member of the Society of Photography, and keep photography alive and well and healthy in South Africa. So let's tell a story, and is the topic of my talk here today. And I'm a visual storyteller. What I mean by that is, yes, I am a creative photographer, but I love to tell stories within my work. What I'm going to be doing today is to try combine a few things together. The first thing is the way I see things. And please, guys, I'm a nutcase, okay? So I see things sometimes totally different to the rest of you. You'll ask some of my friends, we'll walk around and I'll say, geez, look at that. And they're, oh, where? And sometimes I see things differently, but we are all unique and we all see things differently. Each one of us is a creation by God, and we see things differently. So I want to just show you the way I see things and the way I've seen them and the way I do see them. The second thing is, most importantly about my talk today, is the impact of telling a story within your photos. That is extremely important. And what I mean by that is, photography is simply capturing images. And most of these things have already been captured before. And what I'm going to try to install in you, and if you can see me, inject into you, is to put a part of you in that. And by putting a part of you into that photograph, you tell a story about you. And it's something that is vitally important in photography today. The other thing is my work, my stories, and my images. I'm going to take you through some of my images and my photographs today and explain them to you in the way I saw it. And I know there's going to be serious frowns, because what you naturally might see is not necessarily the story. So come with me on this journey through my photography, my work, and some of the things that I've learned, and I hope in some way that might inspire you to see your work in that same way. So photography is many, many things. You can't put photography in a nutshell. It's elements of chemistry. In the old days, we used to develop our photographs, and still today we print them. It's optics and lenses and the way optics works. It's physics, angles, shapes, designs. It's digital technologies, our computers, our cameras. It's a whole digital world, an electronic world that we've got to look at and master. It's creative and artistic approach. It's visual components put together to build composition. It's light. Light is an important factor of photography, and all light one needs to understand, and it's communicating visually. And in this particular section of communicating visually is telling the story, telling what you wanted us to see as a photographer. Notice that the top four are all technical things, and the bottom four are all creative things. A lot of us are stuck in technical things, and a lot of us are stuck in the creative thing. Quite honestly, I'm not really interested in all the technology around photography. My camera is just simply an extension of who I am, and I want to capture things the way I see them. So I'm more in the creative side of photography. However, this is not just a creative talk. This is how to tell a story within any type of photograph that you take. photography is a wide variety of landscape. It's a huge amount of elements which we can define as photography. There is so many genres. There's so many different things where photography is used into. So in a lot of cases, telling a story in a photograph is sometimes lacking, and we don't need to, because it's used for a purpose of examination, forensics, and all of those types of things. However, what photography is also is it can tell a story. And I have this debate quite often with fellow photographers, and they say, no, portrait photography is capturing a portrait. There's no story in it. And I'm saying, but you can make a story. You can put on a hat. You can lead us into what you were thinking. You can dress the model, or you can look at it. And I mean, you go look at some portrait photography out there. There's incredible stories that are led through it. Forensic photographers studying a crime scene. A forensic photographer needs to tell a story of that crime scene. But the one field that I want you to concentrate on is the journalists. You see, journalists ask this question. They say, when they look at their photo and their image, they say, is it newsworthy? Does it tell a story? And there's millions of photographs of Cyril Ramaphosa. Millions. I mean, it's all over. But the photograph of Cyril Ramaphosa crying with a little child in his hands is a story about Cyril. And those are the images that we need to capture. These are the things, is to try in some way install what you are seeing and what you want us to see in a photo. Ansel Adams is one of my, I love Ansel Adams and his work. And yet, when you look at Ansel Adams' work, it doesn't quite portray a story. It's landscapes. But when we look deeper into his work, we can see Ansel Adams in it. And he says, and a lot of my quotes, all my quotes today are Ansel Adams quotes. He says, a photo is usually looked at and seldom looked into. And I think, guys, that is where we're making the mistake, is that in clubs and on Facebook and all over, we're simply looking for the wow image, and we very seldom are looking into what the author is trying to tell us. And when looking into images, we can see little hints. And like Emil said last night, a lot of times it leaves us with more questions than what we actually get answers. And that is the intrigue of this amazing thing of telling stories of your photos, leading us in, letting us know a little bit about your personality, about who you are in the photograph. So there's this new buzzword over the last couple of years called the visual storytellers. And I call myself a visual storyteller because when I capture an image, I'm trying to tell you a story. I'm trying to release something that's within me, or something that I've seen and the way I see it. And I'm trying to portray that in a different way and trying to get you to think about the way I've captured this image and for me to think about it. But everybody today is a visual storyteller. On Facebook, you just simply post something and says visual storyteller. I went to my doctor a year and a half ago, and he's got the scope thing. They need to do this thing on my body, and he's explaining to which orifice he's going to put the scope. And I'm not going to get into much graphic detail, but he showed me photos and he showed me how this procedure was going to take place. He was a visual storyteller. Yes, it was a horror movie. It was something that I didn't enjoy, and I certainly didn't go back for. They can keep their scope and shove it where they wanted to do with me, but he was a visual storyteller. So we all, in a sense, are visual storytellers in our own way. It's how we can portray that on one sheet of paper. Let's delve into where this all came from. Historically, we are built with this thing built in us. A lot of people say to me, but Martin, I don't know how. No, you do. It's inside of you. You used to read stories to your children. You used to listen to your mom and dad tell you stories. We do. It's inside of us. Let's look into history. And this goes back to the beginning of time, to caveman. But let's have a look at some visual storytellers, the ancient Egyptians. They called the creatives in to paint the tombs of the pharaohs, to tell the stories of them. I don't think these stories were meant to be painted that we would later on in life see them, because those tombs were hidden away. And when we opened up these tombs, we could read. And the Egyptians were masters at telling stories, even their alphabet. I mean, if you look across just the second row there, there's water, there's duck, I'm sure that actually means water off of a duck's back. But there's the story that they've led us into of the ancient Egyptians, telling the story of the pharaohs, telling the stories of their lifestyle. They were visual storytellers and passed it on. This was their photography. If they had cameras like we had today, they wouldn't have this. They'd have photographs of the pharaoh and his entire life and his stories that are on there. Let's go a bit deeper into it. The Bushmen and Khoisan locally, I mean, have told their stories. They painted them on the walls of caves to tell stories so that people, their people and people further on could come back and see their story about what they went through. And they left it for us. This is the Khoisan and Bushman's photography of the time. I know you all say, no, it's rock art, but they didn't have a camera. This is rock photography to Bushmen. Okay, and they wrote these stories and drew these stories so that future on and further on, and their people and their generations and their generations could look upon the great hunts and the lives of them. This is their photography. It's instituted inside of us. Let's go further on into great artists. And I mean, Leonardo da Vinci, oopsie, I'm going too fast. Let me go back. Leonardo da Vinci, and many artists of the time, oh, what's happening? Sorry. And many artists of the time painted there. Look at Leonardo's portrait of the Mona Lisa. He didn't just paint the Mona Lisa. He told a story about it by putting a background into this image, by telling, and I mean, art theorists have gone through this image so many times. And I mean, if you go on the internet and just read about the Mona Lisa and what Leonardo da Vinci was actually thinking of the time. Let me just zoom into this. This is the story of Christ. And I mean, Leonardo has told this huge story of all the gathering of people. And then he said, let me put in a background, and there's buildings going on, half-built buildings and uncompleted work of Leonardo. He's even in the back here got an elephant on rock art. And I mean, Leonardo is trying to tell his story the way he envisaged it. This is Leonardo's photos. These are things that he had inside of his mind that he needed to get out onto canvas. And importantly is that we have got that inside of us. Yes, we might not be Leonardo da Vinci, but we've got a camera in our hands and we can tell the story of what we are actually thinking. Now, this is my bud. This is the man that, and that's Henry Peach Robson. In 1856, he produced these images and many, many more. They're all available on the internet. Just my screen wasn't big enough to put all of them on there. Now, Henry Peach Robson was the pioneer. He wasn't the only one. There were different people, but he was known as the pioneer of composite photography. 1856, not 1956. This is over 160, 150 years ago. Almost 160 years ago. Almost 170. But what I'm trying to say is that here, what Henry has done is he's gathered in the first case 4 different photographs, and in the second case with the sick child 5 different photographs, put them together on glass plate and worked them in such a way to tell Henry Peach Robson's story. Okay, so a lot of people say to me, oh, thank God for Photoshop that you can do composites. No, before color photography was even thought of or invented, 30 years after photography was invented itself, people were doing composite photography, putting images together to tell stories. I keep saying this, and I keep saying it again and again. Photography is not what we photograph, it's how we photograph it, how we tell our story, what we see. I mean, Emil was saying last night, Table Mountain has been photographed so many thousands and millions of times by everybody who ever visited. But it takes you to put Table Mountain in the way that you see it into your image and create it around you. We want to see how Martin took photos of Table Mountain. That's what it's all about. Henry Peach Robson in 1869, published a book entitled Pictorial Effects and Photography, being hints on composition and chiaroscuro for photographers. In this, he maintains that the composite image is directly affected by his hand and is therefore art. One of the primary forces behind the rise of pictorialism was the belief that straight photography was purely representational, and it showed reality. Listen, it showed reality without the filter of artistic interpretation. Therefore, simply a record of facts, lacking artistic intent or merit. Now, please, everybody, this was written in 1869. The cameras that we had in those days were nothing like the machines that we control today, the computers that we walk around with lenses on them. Okay, by the way, if you want to be quite fancy about photography, say at any club meeting, or if you want to speak to a couple of photographers and say, no, your images lack clear, I can't even pronounce it. I need Hein Wasserfort here to help me out on this one. Chiaroscuro. What he's simply saying there is dodging and burning, darkening the darks and lightening the highlights to create an edge on your photographs, to create contrast in your images. And so dodging and burning was done back in the beginning. Composites were done back in the beginning. And we all have this big flair about the artistic feel. Ladies and gentlemen, what we want to see in the images is you and the way you photographed them, not the way and how you created it. Everybody's asking me, oh, what f-stop did you use? No, look at the photo. Look at the story that I'm trying to get into those images. John Hartfield, German photographer in 1920, he campaigned against the war and the massacre of people. Here he's got the hyena with the hat on it and the British royal emblem of honor or whatever that is. And he's simply depicting Winston Churchill. He was a big advocate against war and the slaughter of human beings through the Second World War, also mainly against the Germans. But I mean, people say, oh, smoke photography. Look, there he was doing this in the 1920s. He was putting composites together and creating how he felt. And what we're seeing here is his depiction of what war is, and his depiction of standing up against this evil onslaught of what he was going through. And in fact, what we're actually seeing is how John felt about the war. We don't need to be creatives in any way to capture stories in images. Here's some iconic images. The first one being the death, what was this photograph called? Let me just quickly have a look for you. It's a depiction of AIDS and what it's called the face of AIDS. And here the father is holding his son. And let me just try to zoom into that so that you can see the storytelling about this image. He's holding his son. He was an AIDS activist and one of the few people that at the time they were standing up against this onslaught of AIDS, this terrible disease that we have. And the father saying goodbye. Shortly after this photograph was taken, this young man of 35 years of age, 36 years of age, died. But if we look at the photograph, the hands of Christ behind, the pastor's hands, the mom holding their other daughter in their hands, yes, they are cut off. They are, amputated. But this image became an iconic image in Life magazine of the face of AIDS. The next one is, we all know, is the attack of bin Laden on his compound. And we can see that by just this image and the story. Notice they are journalistic images. They are newsworthy. They are telling a story. Here the president is sitting aside and he's given the control of this whole operation over to the general to control it and all the people looking on to see it. Hillary Clinton here holding her mouth saying, oh my God, I hope everything's going to be okay. It tells a story. It's not creative. It's real. Tiananmen Square, the massacre in China, where one man coming out of his shopping with his bag stood in front of 5 oncoming tanks. Notice the back tank is cropped off. And sometimes I feel that in photography we're being far too critical and we're taking away from what sometimes these stories are. He stood in front of 5 tanks, literally saying, "Take me out." They killed many, many people the day before this, but yet this man stood in front of tanks, eventually actually got on top of the tank. We have the well-known Vietnamese photograph, the story of war. This young lady, young girl running in front is still alive and does talks all around, motivational talks all around the world. 30%, 40% of her body was burned through napalm. You can see the American photographer walking. This was a Vietnamese photographer walking back. You can still see the cloud of smoke from this napalm. And what did it hit? Children and the vicious thing. Look how out of focus his hand is through movement. He was using the wrong shutter speed. And yet this photograph went on to become an iconic image of the Vietnamese War and the suffering of those people. So of course, the Americans raising the flag on top of Iwo Jima, which was actually a staged photograph. There's even a movie about this. These men became legends through their time, stories in photographs. And of course, the amazing one, the starving child and the vulture. Please go read up about this photograph. It's tragic. Even the photographer himself has a story that actually happened to him. But he's captured a time, a place, and he's captured that so well. Are we looking at all the faults in the photograph? No. The story compels this photograph and takes us to these things. And I think that is what is so little spoken about in photography. We're so focused on sharpness in images and all of the rules and the rules of thirds. And what we're lacking to see, what we are really lacking to see, is what the author is trying to tell us. What are you trying to say to us? I was judging about 6-7 months ago it was just before COVID, with 3 judges in the front. And a beautiful photograph came up of a young child sitting in front of a window with a tear in the eye, and it was a little book. And it was a very sad type of image. And I loved the story in it, so I marked it quite high. When the score came up, I couldn't understand why the photograph got such a low point. And I turned to the judge next to me and I said, "What did you score it?" And he says, "No, I scored it low. The border is terrible." But he failed to see the image was inside the border. We are tending to look at all the faults within photographs and not all the things that are in there. We're tending to see that the photograph taken just down the road of the copy doesn't compete with the Alps, which are taken in Switzerland, but yet the copy was far better photograph. And we are tending to look at photographs and not look at the stories that are inside of them. Photographers aren't putting stories anymore. That we're running around trying to take the best photograph we ever can. We're buying the best, most expensive equipment. And I can tell you, I bought a lot of cameras in my time, but it came with no photographs in it. And I only wish it did, so that I could just present them. But I've had to go out and try to tell stories and create those things in them. You see, don't take photos of something. Take photos about things. And if you can just sit behind your camera and ask yourself that question, am I taking a photo of something, or am I taking a photograph about something? Because if you take a photo about something, you're telling a story. And you're telling it the way we would like to see it. We would like to see you in your images. So let's tell you a story of some of my work and some of the things that I've actually captured in there. So my good friend, friends asked me to come out and take some nature photos with him, and we went off to the Pilansberg, and we were all driving a convoy, and the next thing, this big rhino was standing in the road. And as I went past this rhino, I mean, he was right next to my car. He was huge. I know rhinos are big, but I'm not a nature photographer. But if you stand right next to a rhino, these things are huge animals. And as I drove up the road, I thought, I can't even express. I couldn't take a photo of him because he was so close to my car. I can't even express the size of this monster. His bum was in the front of my car and his tail, and at the back of the car, where my petrol cap was his horn. I mean, that's a huge mammoth animal. And I said to myself, imagine being a bushman in the day, or somebody walking through a bush and coming across this. You'd run back to the village and you'd go to your chief and say, "Oh, there's a huge rhino." And he's going to say, "When I was a young boy, there was a much bigger one, and it was called this." And I thought of these legends and how these legends could have become in Africa, and then went about photographing different images to put them together to try to tell that story in my mind of these giants, these myths, these legends of Africa. And we've got some of the biggest animals in this country that we can get access to. And then what I thought is, I'm going to put a different tribe, in this case, Xhosa, beating his drum, calling the ancestors, calling these mythical gods to him. And there are those stories in the in Africa of the big snakes that lead through our I don't know all these stories, but there's of these monster snakes and stories of these monster animals. So somebody came to me and said, Martin, this has been done before. I've seen them on the web. And I said, of course, most of the stuff that we do has been done before. This is just my interpretation of it. Then another person contacted me and said, oh, you've taken this from King Kong, Hollywood. Yes, King Kong was a great African animal, which they made a Hollywood movie from. But it's come from the beginning of time, from Khoisan and the Bushmen. You can see how small the Bushmen are to the animals that they were trying to capture. They were telling a story. They were trying to tell the story of these great beasts that roamed the lands and how they hunted them. Very similar to my images. I just wish I could go back to these Bushmen and say, hey, thank you for inspiring me. You told me the story. And here we have the Zulu in front of Izirafu. And in Zulu, that means the one who sticks his head above the clouds, above the trees. And they must have seen these animals in some mythical way, because that is the way I wanted to create them. Yes, for the purest photographers out there, I'm sorry. Many photographs have been ripped to pieces in order to create these visions and these things that I feel that I want to actually display. Is it art? Is it photography? Of course it's photography. It came from 30 years after photography was invented. Composite photography is the part of our photography being and the way we see things. It's part of color photography. It's part of telling stories in images. This photograph went on to win the Africa Photo Awards, Creative Photograph of the Year throughout Africa. And it's an image, once again, here I've used Lesotho, of the monster of all animals, the elephant, okay, in Ndlovu. And that's what I called him. And here I'm wanting to see, to show how these people greeted these monsters. And he's not in a charge, he's coming forward, and this interaction between human beings and animals. And this is my wildlife type of photography. Not to say, please, I love all aspects, and I love the amazing images that are posted, but it's my way of showing my interaction between what I see as nature. It wasn't only African giants. I managed to photograph some chimpanzees, and I wanted to put them into the sense of where I felt they needed to be. And if you have a look here, I've even put in little dust specks that is sitting up of the early morning light when we see that the pollen grains in the air. To have one judge tell me, oh, the image is very noisy, but that's fine. If he thinks it's noisy, he's not really looking into the image. That's fine with me. I've got my chimp, and I'm sure my chimp is very, very proud of his photograph. But to me, it tells a story of a lone chimp inside the forest. So another story here is I went to Sabi Congress last year this time. I was in Sabi with all of you and those who attended the Congress. And I was out in the bush and with some friends, and Francois Roux came past me, and he was actually just behind this tree when I took this photograph. By the way, Francois, there were no chimps at the time, that I understand, but Francois turned to me and he said, I can't wait to see what you are going to do with this photograph. And I think I said to you, Francois, I said, no, this is for my chimps. You see, I had this photograph of these chimps, and the story here is, I don't know what these chimps were doing, but my story is we've got two very angry chimps here. All right. And we've got this onlooker looking onto the whatever's being spoken about in chimpanzee, which I'm not quite sure how to. Then we have the very sorrowful one. And there, I see this as a court case. I see here is the prosecution, here is the accused, he's a lawyer, and we have the little child coming in to the whole story, all set in the way I would have loved that these chimpanzees would have been. And all I'm simply doing is trying to tell the story of it. What you take out of it is great. You see, there's what you might see and what I would love you to see. And quite frankly, is my story doesn't really mean much. I'm hoping that when you see my images and you see images, that you'll walk away with your story from it. The viewer of your image doesn't want to see an image, but wants to see you and the way you see things. That is vitally important. You see, if we look at the photograph, the great sports photograph of Charles Stransky kicking the goal over the try line, to all of us, that photograph was amazing. It was that picture of the Springboks defeating in the 1996 World Cup, defeating the All Blacks where we won that World Cup. That photograph was hated in New Zealand. Obviously, okay, it was loved in South Africa. But if we went into a little rural town in China that has never ever heard of rugby and we showed them that photograph, it would mean absolutely nothing. You see, certain ones of us can see certain things which relate to us as photographers, and people out there, the public, can relate to an image of what you are depicting, and not everybody will. We must understand that it's not a bad thing. Some photographers take reality and impose domination of their own thought and spirit. Others come before reality more tenderly, and photograph to them is an instrument of love and revelation. Now, if you can see me on my screen, there comes a time in your photography where this machine doesn't mean anything. It is an extension of your hand, your eye, and your body. It's an extension of your heart. What you're doing is you're actually going out there. You know how to control it. You understand the light and all the technology and all those things that come from. It's not about beautiful images. It's about capturing yourself and what you like and how you share it and telling stories with your camera. You see, some of us just capture reality and believe that that's the image. A lot of us want to capture more tenderly a photograph and as an instrument of love and revelation of ourselves. Ansel Adams. So let's tell a story. The train station. I managed to get into the basement of the old Johannesburg station and photograph them, but they were just structural photos. And inside that station, I felt the memories of departure and arrival and the heyday of steam and the heyday of trains. Remember the times when we used to get dressed up and beautifully dressed to get onto a train so we could depart and go somewhere. But departure was sadness and arrival was happiness. And I got back with these images and I said, I've got to do a series of this, trying to photograph in a way that looked old and edit in such a way that would look old, simply like a tapestry or an art piece. But when one looks closer, they would be photographs. And I came up with this series of work. And in this particular case, the wonderful dress of departure. This lady is leaving. She's just been dropped off by the car. She's going to go up the stairs and waving goodbye. Departure sometimes was very, very sad because it was goodbye. And arrival was so happy because we got to see people. And in these days, people couldn't transport around the world very easily. So a lot of times when these trips were taken, years and years to see people, and I'm trying to depict that story within my images. The days of steam, in this case, the days of war. This photograph I named Honey or Love, the war will soon be over. You can see the sadness on her, but it's not just a photograph of trains, it's a photograph of departure, where they used to dress up in their military suits. This was photographed in the old Johannesburg station, which is a monument now, and one can get permission to go photograph in there, but it's an empty space. Great photographing, but it tells no story. I've taken the trains and trying to depict the era of this particular station in my particular way. Raining at the station, in the Johannesburg basement, the steam train and the rain coming down and rushing towards the train, also once again all dressed up down the stairway, and showing the water droplets in the water and the reflections, trying to capture that age and time of steam. Waiting for you. In this case, there's a clock, and the clock is 10 past 10. She's not there. She never got off the train. There were no cell phones to say, I never got there. Something has happened. And this lone man waiting for his love to arrive at the station. And I've depicted the love by having an image similar to him in the background of a man with a woman, and building this image in such a way that I could tell the story of steam, something that I felt and worked on in order to get this image across. The story of war. I love taking photographs in such a way that I can depict things that are inside of me, and simply going and taking photographs of these war machines didn't quite do it for me. Each one of these machines had its history. They are in museums, and I needed to try tell these like this. I think it's the Focke-Wulf. Trying to tell, I had to pronounce that very carefully. Trying to tell the story of this plane and what it went through in Germany during the Second World War. And so I put it on a runway. I've set fire to the engine. I know the museum wouldn't be very happy about that. I've shown an air bombing raid by the British, and I've put a lady on the wing. You won't believe how many people wrote to me and saying the Germans had no female pilots. And I said, who said she's a pilot? You see, what we've lacked to think about during war is the involvement of what women contributed to war. They were ground crew. In the UK, there were female pilots. A lot of women contributed so valuably to that war effort on both sides, on the German side, on all the sides, Italians and in the British side. Women took over the jobs of men. Women worked in the military in many different realms so that we could, that the whole country would go. But I find that wasn't telling the story. Everybody wanted to see a man on this plane. No, I wanted to put a woman to symbolize her involvement, not as a pilot, but maybe as a ground crew or something inside of my image. The Sherman tank. Photographed and also out of a war museum. This tank was renowned as one of the best tanks in the Second World War because it was so small. Everybody laughed at this when it entered on the battlefield compared to the big German tanks. And I wanted to show this image of this tank and its ability that it used to hide away inside small spaces, wait for attacks, and simply surprise attacks on the enemy, not right out in the field. And being so small, it was a difficult target to hit. So I put this photograph together in order to try to tell the story of these particular tanks. If you had a look on the news over the last couple of years in Syria, the war-torn battle of tank warfare inside the streets of Syria, these are where people were living. So I went to Fox Street in Johannesburg trying to simulate and took a photograph of Fox Street. By the way, this is very much how Fox Street looks in Johannesburg. No, I'm only joking. And took away all the power lines and give this image that gray dust of cement when it's all been blown to pieces. This is a T-36, I think it is, for the tank it uses. I'm not a great tank guy, but I wanted to show this image with no color at all, the scenes of war, just with the orange fire burning on the side, to tell the story of this tank and the battles that it might have been in. Desert Storm. This is a T-72. What was his name? But the Iraq type of tank. It's a Russian tank, which is important. And these were tanks that were used in Gulf War and Desert Storm, where the American tanks went in and took these tanks apart. They're very old tanks. And here I've shown it in the desert with the oil fields burning, trying to depict the story of these tanks and their battles that they had inside of them. And sort of giving homage, if you want to, about these machines which are still in our museums that we can go view and see, and sort of giving them honor to the battles that they took place in. Okay. If an image talks to you, Jill said this, I think it was last night, no, the night before. Jill said, if an image talks to you, then it's a good image. You can feel it. It won't talk to everybody. We're all unique and we all see things differently. If an image reaches out to you, you actually feel it. Then it's telling you its story. And it might just be to you. It might not be to the masses. A lot of times when I talk about images and their stories, people say, I don't see that in the image, but sometimes people do. And then that image is meant for you. So the big blue ocean, I love the ocean. I'm from Johannesburg, so I don't get to see the ocean often. And when I see the ocean, it sort of lends me to take those types of photographs, and not just landscapes, but I take everything. If I can get to, I just love photography in general. It's just that I'm trying to depict now the storytelling part of it. This photograph won Best Creative Photograph at the Photo and Video Experience in Johannesburg, a big exhibition of photography and their equipment. And it's a very difficult image to understand, and one can't really just depict it from just what it is. Yes, it's a very creative photograph. And what I'm trying to depict here, and I'll just try and get a marker for you. Where are we? Laser pointer. Is on the left-hand side of the image is night, and on the right-hand side of the image is day. That was hard in itself, is to try get an image to balance having daylight and nighttime with the stars all in the same photograph. And I really battled to get that across. You see, the lighthouse is seen as a place of sanctuary. It's our life. If you were a sailor and you saw a lighthouse, it's the life source. It tells us where land is. It tells us where to go. And we got this calming of the storm and the storm coming through and the birds. So what I'm trying to say here, and of course the significant light, is what I'm trying to say is a small part of our life will be the night, the dark times of our lives. But we can go through that and wait for the dawn of the morning to come through. You see, our lives as the lighthouse are sometimes very twisted and complex. And the life I've represented by birds flying through this. But what we need to do is to keep focused on the light of God. And if we can keep focused on that, we will be able to go through our night into our days, through our storms into the calmness. And that is what I'm trying to say in this very complex creative work. Here's just really a simple image, but I've captured the boat in this. This was taken just outside Mozambique, and I was on a cruise out there, and this big storm came in, and there was this calmness before the storm, and we could see the boat with the sail down because we can't get away. The winds are coming now, and we need to make ready. The man with his arm on his hip, all trying to depict a story of the scene. This one is called Lost at Sea. Who knows the stories that the boat would tell? Sort of a landscape, a creative landscape of the boat laying on the shore. And I love fishermen. Those small little boats that they go out from the Cape. And this was photographed just outside Hout Bay. And of course, enhanced to create my mood and my story of these amazing people that go out and fish. But importantly to understand is that we will face these storms. We will be nimble little boats in this life, but we need to head to the light. We need to get through to the light of the storm. The storms will soon be over for us. And so I'm sort of trying to tell an image and try to tell a story within that as well. And I liked that last one so much that I thought, let me do a more modern approach of the more bigger fishing trawlers and trying to see myself as somebody washed overboard in this image, laying in the sea and seeing this big fishing trawler like some of these Discovery Channel movies that are on, and seeing this big raging ship coming out of the ocean, trying to tell a story of what it would look like in the photo. The story of dance. So they invited me. My friends say, we got to go to the ballet. Now, guys, I'm sorry. And for all of those who love ballet and all of those who love that particular dance, I didn't like that particular part of dance. I don't want to see women in miniskirts and men in tights. To me, it didn't really gel well. And old Derek, good friend of mine, and I hope you're here today, Derek, said, come on, I'll pay for a ticket for you to go. So I think I took 35 photographs on the first time I went to the ballet, because they encapsulated me. They showed me their movement. They did their art on stage. They just, it was unbelievable. I was so totally wrong about just this thought process of dance. But what happened was there were 40, 50 photographers all capturing the same images. And what I was seeing is this movement and this amazing fairy tale in front of me of how these women and men move their bodies and shape their bodies to tell a story. So I came up with a sequence of dance photographs, and I love now photographing dance, thanks to Derek and thanks to these beautiful ballerinas and dancers wherever you might be, because you've certainly changed my viewpoint on it. And I see you as fairies. And I put this one inside the old train station, using that station, because the train station is literally me, the shell, and they filled that shell. They filled a void in my life. They filled something which I didn't believe was actually even possible. So to me, she's sprinkling her fairy dust all over me and showing me her dance moves. But while photographing dancers, I found it very difficult because they're moving. And I think videographers would photograph dancers far better than me, just taking still images. And this worried me that as they move, my shutter speed needed to be high. And so I tried slowing down my shutter speed to get this blurry mess. And some guys really pull it off well. I couldn't. So what I did was capture movement in 4 different photographs of a dancer moving 1, 2, 3, photo 2, 3, photo 2, 3, and photo, and putting them together so that I could see that actual dance movement of one dancer moving through a sequence. And other people enjoyed it, and I certainly liked it. And I thought, that's my way that I see dancers, is I see them in stages of these moves. And sometimes these moves are so quick that they just gone in a fleeting moment, and how the material would move. So I did a sequence of them, this one being the ballerina who's turning, she goes down onto a foot, lifting up, and then going into what I believe is a pirouette, and sort of trying to capture that movement of that single dancer within maybe 2 seconds of a dance move. The red and the flow of the dresses in a similar type of image, once again, taking out all the back images and putting these photographs together in such a way that, is the dancer going to like this photograph? Am I telling a story of her dance movement? Yes, I am. And here, the Wicked Witch, who I must tell you must be one of the most incredible dancers I've ever seen, and how she moved with that cloth. And here, once again, 2 to 3 seconds of capturing her in those particular dance moves to tell the story of her. Here are some of my disc photos. Yes, they've been done before. And what I do is simply remove all the background and try to capture them as an art piece. Try to say, could I hang this on a wall in a dance studio or in my... And I love the motion that these twirls create. They remind me of records and CDs, and also reminded me of the movement of that arm as it would go up, and of the foot. So I love doing them, and I thoroughly enjoyed. But what I'm trying to do is to tell you 2 things: her movement and music, all in a still photograph. Once again, another one of the dance with the disc, and moving around and carefully placing that disc and manufacturing the disc. The disc is made up of the edge of this entire dancer. So I capture the entire edge of this dance and bend it and move it into a circle using Photoshop, of course, in order to create what I'm seeing in that jump and in that dance. So let's tell a story. Sometimes the stories that you see in the images aren't necessarily the thought process of that. You see, there are 2 sides to all these stories: the side of the photographer and the side of the viewer. There's also a side of emotion and the way we feel about photos. And this story is quite a tragic story, in the sense that I was asked last year to go and do a talk in Montague. And so I went through to Montague, and I wasn't feeling well at the time. I actually almost never made it. And while I was there, Kim Stevens, and if Kim is there, she'll tell you, came running up to me and said to me, have you heard about Pauline van der Spey, which is a photographer up here in Johannesburg, which I just know through photography. I don't know her family. I've never spoken to her about her family or anything like that. So I said, no, what about it? She said, her daughter has collapsed and had an aneurysm. And Pauline happened to be in Italy at the time. Can you imagine being away from your home and your daughter is collapsed and rushed into a hospital with an aneurysm? Seconds must have been minutes, and minutes must have been hours, and days must have been weeks and months. Pauline had to, I'm not sure if her husband was with her or the family members. I don't know. That's Pauline's story. Had to get home. And while I was there in Montague, this touched me so deeply. I'm in Montague. What happens if something happened to my child up in Johannesburg? I mean, or to something like that? sadly, Suzanne passed away, and very, very tragically for the Van der Spey family. And how the hell, Suzanne, did you make it into into my presentation? So a couple of days later, I went with my friends, and we were traveling down the road, and I was trying to tell the story of, you should go off of the beaten track. You should go look not on the main roads. We should go, and we went up this road, and Simon, you guys were there, and Derek, and we rode up this road up into the mountains, and suddenly we found this little old house, and we all jumped out and we photographed it, and the guys wanted to go along and photograph some clouds through the trees. I'm not really a cloud and tree photographer, so I helped them all set up and get there a few shots, and I walked away, and I came back to this house. But just next to this particular house was this graveyard. And I sat in this graveyard thinking about Suzanne and the Van der Spey family and what they were going through. And strangely enough, I took this photograph of this cross. I took many photographs in this graveyard, but this is the one where I was sitting. And if you zoomed into this photograph, which I'm willing to do for you, you'll see that this is a young lady, Janita Simon, and she was 37 years of age. And I was looking at this and thinking of Suzanne and Pauline and the family at the time. And, it really touched me. I felt at peace in this poor cemetery. You can see the 2-liter Coke bottles. And behind this, a little tombstone saying 2 years old. There was children buried inside this graveyard. And if I turned, I didn't take a shot of it from where I was standing. If I turned to my back, there's this amazing view of mountains, and I felt some form of calmness here. I felt quite at ease sitting in a graveyard and thinking about these things, and being actually quite saddened about Suzanne and Pauline and the situation of their family. And I took some other photographs. And believe it or not, 2.5 months later, I had to face the perils that the Van der Spey family faced, and Marlene and Johan and people that had lost their kids. And creativity, photography, and all of that just disappears when something like that happens to you. My kids, my friends, all said to me, get back to your photos and go and capture images. And I just didn't want to anymore. So there's stories behind images. And I sat down and said, I need to get down and do something. So I went through thousands of my photographs, and nothing meant really anything. And so it was day after day. And the next thing was, I stumbled on my photographs from Montague and the little house. Not really thinking about Suzanne and the thought process that I had in this little graveyard. I developed an image and posted it. And just before I posted it, I had to name the photograph. And without knowing, what do you name it? Little house on the prairie, or house in the mountains, or what do you name a photo like this? Yes, I put the little man in there and spiced up the image the way I would want it. So I just simply named it the shack. Who knows? It looks like a shack to me. So I posted on the image, and the very, very first comment that came up on Facebook was, "Have you read the book?" And I said to myself, what book? I mean, have you read the book? Maybe my photograph had been depicted in some storybook somewhere or something like that. I don't know what you're talking about. So I didn't write back straight away. I quickly went and Googled the book. Okay, what? The Shack. I actually thought they were talking about the book that the man was reading in my photograph. And when I found out what The Shack was all about, I haven't read the book, I realized that I'd seen the movie. I immediately went and got the movie and watched it. And then the story came to me. I didn't create the story, ladies and gentlemen. It just happened. I can't tell you what happened in this graveyard. I can't tell you how come this photograph ever existed. But one thing for sure is that the movie The Shack, my friends Pauline, Marlene, Johan, and so many of you, all of you helped me get through what I've actually had to get through. And love my photography again, and love people, and actually be a survivor of this sort of thing that has happened to us, and manage to put it. Is this possibly, from a creator point of view, is this photograph the pearly gates? Who knows who the man is standing reading his book? It could be God himself waiting, reading our lives or chapters, or who's next on the list. What happens behind that door? What happens up in the mountains? What happens in the mist? I don't know. One day maybe I'll be told what the whole story of this image meant to me. But there are two sides of it. There's a side that we capture these photographs, and there's the side which you would see is just a house with a man standing outside an old oak tree. So many images came about because of this tragedy in my life and things. And this is it, is I was a victim of a serious crash. Everything complete. And a lot of people have asked me in this photograph if that's Mark standing on top of the plane. No, Mark is no longer with us. That's me, survivor of a terrible situation in my life. And what's important is to get on top of that situation, to actually say, wait, I am a survivor. Yes, it is sad, and it is very, very terrible. But how did I survive? By reaching to heaven, and somehow the grace of God surrounding me to actually manage to get me through. Not only the circle of God, you, people all around me that managed to make me strong. And that's where this image came from. That's me. Yes, it's a self-portrait. I only wish that was me. I mean, look at the abs on this guy. I mean, he's an amazing ballerina, and he took off his shirt so that I could take this photograph. I didn't envisage this photograph in the beginning, but we've got to be strong and not drowned in this depression of life. We've got to be strong and reach out to others, because they will guide us through. These are the stories that I want to tell in my photography. You see, they're stories from deep within. I put this at club, and one of the judges told me, a lovely butt shot. Okay, I don't do nudes at all, as I'm sure many of you do know. And this model posed for me, and it wasn't the intention of the photograph. Once again, I had this photograph and I was dying to do something. And this is, lead me not into temptation, from the Lord's Prayer. We are led into temptation so many times by beautiful things such as women, alcohol, drugs, and so many, gambling, so many things. And we are led into this beautiful world. But notice the fiery furnace behind her, and it's a different world in front of her. Yes, the lights are on, but nobody's home. We don't realize it. And then I had to follow on. I'm actually wanting to do a photograph of the entire Lord's Prayer, so that in my way, just something I'd love to do. This is the following sentence, which is, but deliver me from evil. Evil is a terrible thing, and I've depicted this in blue. So there you got the warmth and the beauty of being, lead me not into temptation, but deliver me from evil. The blue, when people have been delivered from alcohol, when they've been delivered from drugs, it's not easy. They are exposed. They feel exposed. It's not an easy thing. It's hell on earth for them. They'd far rather be in temptation. When and this is Ansel Adams, not me, but I can relate to this completely. When I'm ready to make a photograph, I think I obviously see in the mind's eye of something that is not literally there in the true meaning of the word. I'm interested in something which is built up from within me rather than just extracted from without. And there he says it, ladies and gentlemen. Rather take photographs of things that are within you. I'm not saying be creative like me, but let us know how you feel about that location if you're taking landscapes. Let us know how you feel about that person when you're taking your portraits. Let us know about how you feel about doing your desktop photography, your tabletop work. Put a bit of you into it. Let us see it. Let it not just be another tabletop. Let it not just be another model in a bikini. Because we've all seen them. We are photographers, not beauty contest judges. Do it in the way that you feel best. So let's tell a story. And as I get into this final chapter of my talk, what I've done here is I've taken a lot of my photographs that you must probably have seen and put them together to try and tell you this final story, the final chapter of my talk. And what I've done is found a beautiful piece of music, which I really do enjoy. And it's such and what I've tried to do is try to tell you the story of how I feel at the moment and the joy that I actually feel of getting through these things in my life and the joy of photography in a sense. Okay. Now, what I've also done is I've asked my dancing ladies to spruce it up a bit, to come in and add a bit of flair to the story. And I've also asked some old friends who couldn't be with us today to also join me in this video. But I just want to just switch off the slideshow, I should say. Let me just try and get to there and switch the little dot off. Okay. I think that's how you do it. But there's one thing I need to finish off and say. If you think, ladies and gentlemen, fellow photographers, that I sit day in and day out looking at my photos, I don't. I try to create new work and I try to think of things. But that comes from inspiration. That comes from being inspired by you. Not being inspired by me. You photographers and the posts and the work that you put out there, the salons that you enter, these amazing, amazing photographs inspire me. And that is so important to understand, is be an inspiration to others. Be a member of the Photographic Society. Help inspire other people to create. Because I wouldn't be able to do this creation if you people didn't lead me into these beautiful works that you guys do. So I would like to thank you from the bottom of my heart for inspiring me with such beautiful work that you do.
There goes my heart beating, 'cause you are the reason I'm losing my sleep. Please come back now. And there goes my mind racing, and you are the reason that I'm still breathing. I'm hopeless now. I'd climb every mountain and swim every ocean just to be with you and fix what I've broken. Oh, 'cause I need you to see that you are the reason. There goes my head shaking, and you are the I could turn back the clock, I'd make sure the light defeated the dark. I'd spend every hour of every day keeping you safe, and I'd climb every mountain and swim every ocean just to be with you and fix what I've broken. Oh, 'cause I need you to see that you are the reason. Come back down, you are the reason. Just a little closer, I need you to hold me tonight.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I don't want to go through that. There we go.
Well, Martin, we can't help but be moved and inspired.
That's what happens when you invite the creatives into the house.
Absolutely.
To Congress. Yeah, it's all about telling stories. Images are precious, and I mean,
Yeah.
that's just what it is. Just what it
What an
is.
absolute pleasure and honor to have seen that.
Oh, thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you so much.
I want to just read out some comments that have come from people. Someone that says, yeah, some people write a story, some people, I think we're meant to say, tell a story in a picture.
Yeah.
From Pauline, Martin, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Pleasure, Pauline. Thank you. Thank you.
From Rob Heffer, you're a remarkable man, Martin. Wonderful, inspirational message today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Bernie Vivier, wow, thanks for sharing. Brendan Muller, thank you, Martin. Really enjoyable presentation. Nice getting to see the interpretation through the artist's eye.
That's it. Yes. Thank you.
This is Martin again, great presentation, hugely inspirational. Your message intelligently put across. You always encourage, make us think, and want us to take our photography to another level. Congratulations and well done. Thank you, Martin. Great inspiration from Fred and Elise. Maria Boete, jy het no flippin' in trane. Jy het my no flippin' in trane. Not the only one, Maria. Mystical and amazing. Thank you, Martin, for that personal experience. Thank you, Martin. Martin is just, well, you can read through them. There's just lots of messages coming through.
You read them there. But that just installs that power of the story. And in a lot of cases, they're true stories. I mean, we were really there. We were really with friends. And a lot of times there's so much story behind the actual capturing of the image. It's not just about just capturing a photo. It's about capturing ourselves, our lives, and something that we could leave on. I mean, look at Pauline and look at the story that lies behind that particular photograph of hers.
Yeah.
To the Van der Spey family, it's an incredible story. So that's one thing we mustn't lose heart of, is what are these photographs? I think we're too busy chasing medals and too busy trying to, instead of actually taking photographs for ourselves. And that's what it's all about.
Fantastic. Absolutely. We have had one question which I do want to just put to you on a technical aspect.
Yes,
from
sure.
Uncle. He says, Martin, your images have such a luminous light. How do you manage to get that?
Okay, like a dark room in the old days, is that we must understand that technology these days is incredibly powerful. The software that we have made available to us is amazing. First of all, is our cameras. We shoot in RAW, so we can extract a lot more information than just a plain image. A lot of times in my photographs, I'm taking one photo, but because it's in RAW, I'm being allowed to get that photograph a lot lighter in certain parts. So a lot of times I'm actually capturing the image and then bringing out the lighter parts of those images and darkening off the darker parts, all within one photograph. Not only that, is Photoshop and a lot of other software that is available, I'm not here to just punt on Photoshop, is one of the most incredible editing tools on the planet. And I mean, Photoshop came out 2 years before the first digital camera. So the amount of technology they got in there is incredible. You could literally do anything with these editing. So knowing how to edit, I'm fortunate that I can put certain light into photos and where I want them. But we can't Photoshop a piece of rubbish. And that's one thing people don't realize. They come to me and they say, my photograph's slightly blurry, or can you do this and that? No, we need great photographs to edit great images. So what comes in, comes out. And that's important to understand. You've got to capture great images before we should even venture into trying to make bad images good. You know, and I always say, let's turn the ordinary into extraordinary. And ordinary needs to be an ordinary, very good, well captured photograph. Yeah,
well put. So the technical side comes first. You need to have the technical side.
Definitely. We can't edit rubbish, and a lot of times I've had to go back to scenes to recapture them because I haven't captured them in the way that I need to capture them. Yeah, sorry, my nose is running. But you haven't captured them in the way that I needed to capture them. So I think one of the speakers mentioned on revisiting the location several times until you get what you want. Naturally, a lot of my photographs are creative. There's also the normal photographs which I take. And a lot of times I can relate to that is, geez, having to phone the model back, saying, come back in, I've done this wrong. I need the light from a different angle. The light is too strong or something like that to get that initial image correct, you know. And I mean, out of a lot of attempts, 100, 200, 300 photographs of one model, we might find the one that will actually fit into this mind image story that we have, or into this vision that we have of the photograph. We are always trying to create that. But importantly, is you've got to master this before we can master this. And once we start mastering the camera, we know, then we can go out and capture what we want, you know. Lovely.
No, well said. Okay, well, Martin, thanks again. Absolutely.
Thanks very much.
Fascinating, enjoyable, and inspiring.
Thanks very much, everybody. And thanks for coming. That was lovely to have you all here.
Yeah, it was good. We had a really good attendance. It was fantastic.
I actually did put a note on Facebook, please bring tissues to my presentation, but God bless everybody, and I'm glad you all enjoyed it. Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
Martin. Okay, everyone, we're going to take a 15-minute break, and we get ready for the AGM. So it's 20 past 10 now, 25 to 11, we'll start with the AGM. Really encourage you all to stay, please, and hear about what's happening, because from after the AGM, which is really the formalities, but from there on it'll be the members forum, which is an opportunity to ask questions, make comments, and find out more about the PSSA and put your input into it. All right, thank you very much. We'll see you all shortly. And all the directors, I'm going to open you up now so that you'll be able to open your videos and mics.
Jeff, can you hear me? If you
Yes,
can,
yeah.
can you turn the recording off and then restart it so we have Martin's presentation as a single event?